Welcome to the April Project of the Month tutorial. I'm just going to walk you through the pattern. It's really very easy overall. There's just a couple fiddly bits and we're going to go through it. First, we're going to do our patch pocket. I like to take 2 layers, sew them right sides together. I mean, this is canvas, so there's no right or wrong side, but place them right sides together. We're going to sew up one side, across the top, and down this side. I'm leaving this pocket edge open. This is not the pocket. This is going to be the pocket. And I'll show you what I mean in just a second. All right, I've sewn, you can't see the stitches because it was white thread, but I've sewn up the side across the top and down the other side. I'm going to turn it right sides out. I've sewn my patch pocket, I've turned it right sides out. This side is unfinished. These top corners here can get a little lumpy because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers because of the seam allowance, and it's all in here. If it's too lumpy to go under your sewing machine foot, or for your sewing machine to go through it very easily, you just take a hammer or a mallet, the hard side of the mallet, and put it on a hard surface, like go outside to your walkway or a sidewalk or something, and pound that seam. It'll flatten it out, kind of like a meat tenderizer, right? Tenderize your seam allowance. Sounds crazy, totally works. I've cut my main canvas pieces to 13.5 by 13.5 and my lining fabric. Let's take the patch pocket and apply it to the front. Mine's a little smaller than what I put in the instructions. That's the nice thing about it. You can make yours smaller if you want. You can make yours the exact size I said. You can make it a little bit bigger, not much bigger. Okay, we're gonna take this edge, the raw edge, and we're gonna place it like so, about 2 to 2.5 inches up from the bottom, centered left to right. We're gonna sew across this side. That closes up the bottom. Then we're going to flip it up and we're going to sew here, down the side, across the bottom, and up the next side. You want to do a bar tack on this side and this side, or just lock your stitch really, really well. You can also sew a little triangle in the corners. These corners get a lot of stress, so you want to make sure that they're extra strong. All right, I'm going to go to the sewing machine and sew this down. Okay. There it is, our patch pocket. We've got our finished edge up here. We've sewn down this side, across the bottom, and back up that side, and it's open here. Nice strong pocket. I haven't had to turn or hem any corners because I hate doing that. All right, let's go to the next step, which is making the handles. Okay, I've cut 2 handles, and again, the measurements are flexible here. If you want longer handles and you've got more fabric, cut longer handles. If you want shorter handles, of course, cut shorter handles. And if you don't want to sew the handles and you're able to get your hands on some webbing, then use that. But I'm going to make handles because I only have colorful webbing and I want everything to be this canvasy color. We fold it in half long ways and give it a good press. That gives me a nice crease down the center of the entire handle. Then we open it up again and take each raw edge, fold it in to meet that center crease, like so, all the way down, and then give it a good press. One handle done. You see I pressed it in half, made that crease down the center, folded each edge in to meet the center. I didn't go all the way in because these were a little bit narrow. And then press it over again. Now, here's my folded edge. Here is my raw edge where I've turned the edges in. I'm going to sew down this side here. You can sew down both sides if you want to, just so you have even stitches on both sides, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to sew down this one edge. Handles are sewn down on one side. Now let's do the other side. You could measure again or just do the cheat or easy route. Lay one on top of the next and line it up. You want to make sure that your handle doesn't have an awkward twist in the center. In the instructions, I take you through the steps to make the same or a similar patch pocket for the inside, but in the interest of time, we're going to skip that process because I already showed you. You just follow the same steps for the inside. Next, we're going to sew the lining to the bag. Right. Take one side of your bag, one side of your lining, lay it right sides together, and we're going to sew across the top here. And then we're going to do the same thing for the other side of the outside and the lining. Sew it across there. Okay, so I'm going to take this one first, sew it across here. I've sewn across the top of each of my outer bag and lining pieces. Now I'm going to open them up. All right, we've opened this up. So now I've got my outer fabric, the canvas, and my lining fabric. One side sewn together at the top. And then I'm going to take the next one and open it up as well. Now we're going to lay those two pieces right sides together. So you've got lining on the lining, outer bag or canvas on the outer bag or canvas. Make sure your handles are tucked down. And I'm going to line up my seam allowance here as best I can. And line them up the best you can. Pull this back so you can kind of take a peek and see if they're lined up completely. Thrown a pin in the top on this side and this side here, just so they stay secure while I'm pinning the rest of it. I'm going to throw some pins around the perimeter. Then, when it's all secure, I'm going to start at the lining side. I'm going to start about here. I want about 4 to 4.5 inches in. And I'm going to start here and I'm going to sew all around, scooch it over, the perimeter only of the bag. All around just the perimeter. Stopping about here, a couple inches, 3-4 inches again in. Leave an opening at the bottom. Sewn around the perimeter, leaving an opening in the lining that is big enough for my hand to fit in. And also, it's not too close to the edge. That's going to make turning and sewing things back up together when we're done really tricky if we go too close to the edge. So my opening is about this big. Turned it right side out, and at this point you can be done. You don't have to do anything else, just sew up the lining and you have a nice little flat tote bag, book bag, something, right? Really cute, super useful. But I like to box my corners so that I give my bag a little bit of a base, and I'm going to show you how to do that. This is not a difficult thing to do, but it does feel a little fiddly at first. So we're going to take the side seam and the bottom seam and we're going to smush them so they kind of stack on top of each other, and it's going to make a little triangle, and then we sew across that triangle. I do this by putting my hand in the bag. I take my pointer finger and I push it into the corner, which helps me form that. And then my free hand, I smush it together. And you kind of just work those seams on top of each other so that they're stacked right on top of each other. Then I'm going to go and where my stitches start, I'm going to measure in 1.5 inches. That's going to give me a 3-inch base in my bag. I'm going to draw a line directly across, and then I'm going to sew right on that line. I Got a pen. And I'm gonna draw right across that. You can see that line. So that's right where I'm gonna sew. I'm going to put a couple pins in here because, you know, the fabric does not want to stay like this. And I really need to stay together. I need it to stay together until I can get a stitch in there. I've done this side, and it's gonna look like this. Okay, you're gonna have this little dog ear sticking out. We're gonna trim that down in a minute, but first I'm gonna do the other side. But just so you see how this looks, right? Here's my flat side, here's my boxed side, and that is what's gonna give me the little base. You see it already forming right here. So I'm gonna reach my hand in through the opening and do the other side of the outer bag. Again, by taking my pointer finger and putting it far into that point, using my free hand to work the side seam and the bottom seam on top of each other to stack them, making myself a little triangle. And again, starting from where my stitches start, I'm measuring in 1.5 inches. Using my ruler to draw a straight line, because yes, you can eyeball it, I can eyeball it, but I really want it to be straight and accurate. Throw a couple pins in so it stays together. We've got these side boxed corners, and this is the start of, well, you can't see it because it's on the bottom, a little flat base for our bag. I'm going to follow the same steps for both corners of the lining, and then you can see what the base looks like. Same thing to the lining, both corners. And now I'm going to trim it. I'm going to trim it about 1/4 inch or more from the edge. You don't want to go closer because then your seam is weak and it will eventually pop open. All right, my corners are trimmed, and I'm going to turn the bag completely right side out and we'll take a look at it. My corners are done. I've got a 3-inch base on my bag, and you see how those seams are lined up? And I have the same thing in the lining here. All right, and I'm going to tuck that all the way in and take a look at it before I sew the bottom closed. The finished bag. I'm going to go take it over to the ironing board and give that a good press so that my lining kind of tucks in there a little bit nicely. You can top stitch along here if you like to kind of make sure the lining stays tucked in, or just leave it as is. Once you put things in the bag, the lining of course will behave a little bit better. But there's our base, our pockets, our handles, and our lining.